Good morning, everyone. We're going to hit you up with another presidential election. This one, the election of 1824. James Monroe leaving after 2 terms, and this election going to get a little cray-cray. So who's going to win it out? Let's see right now. So James Monroe, the incumbent president. The Democratic Republicans are the only party left in the United States. They're essentially running the show. And James Monroe is going to step down after 2 terms. He's going to take the same route that his predecessors have done. Remember, the only 1-termer up to this point is John Adams, and he is not going to seek another term as president. Now, there's really no competition for the Democratic Republicans because the Federalists had collapsed. Now, Vice President Daniel D. Tompkins, he was considered as a presidential candidate, but he was considered unelectable due to his overwhelming unpopularity and his major health problems. Tompkins would die over a little 3 months after leaving office, so the nomination was left wide open. And the candidate of the Democratic Republicans would be assured of running without really any opposition. The Democratic Republicans putting up for candidates the Secretary of State John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts, the Speaker of the House Henry Clay of Kentucky, the hero of New Orleans Senator Andrew Jackson of Tennessee, Secretary of the Treasury William H. Crawford of Georgia, the Secretary of War John C. Calhoun, and of South Carolina, Crawford's from Georgia, and the Secretary of the Navy Smith Thompson of New York. Now, Thompson would decline to be nominated, and Calhoun would withdraw from the presidential race and go for the vice presidency. Of course, as tradition, nominations for presidents before the days of national conventions, congressional caucuses chose the presidential and vice presidential nominees. So the traditional caucus still was held, and Secretary Crawford and Albert Gallatin of Pennsylvania. If you don't know who Albert Gallatin is, he is the longest serving Secretary of the Treasury in American history. Those guys were nominated for president and vice president respectively, but it was sparsely attended and it was attacked widely as undemocratic. Gallatin later withdrew from the contest for the vice presidency after quickly becoming disillusioned by repeated attacks on his credibility made by the other candidates. He was replaced by North Carolina Senator Nathaniel Macon. A serious impediment to Crawford's candidacy was created by the effects of a stroke he suffered in 1823. Among other candidates, John Quincy Adams had more support than Henry Clay because of his huge popularity among the old Federalist voters in New England. By this time, the Adams family, the Adams political family, not the Adams Family TV show, but the Adams political family, who had traditionally been Federalists, had come to terms with the Democratic Republicans. So with this caucus being attacked as undemocratic and pretty much being thrown out, the Democratic Republicans are going to go the way of the dodo bird and split 4 ways behind 4 different candidates: Adams, Clay, Jackson, and Crawford. Calhoun decides to run with both Adams and Jackson, and Henry Clay is going to bring along for his ride Nathan Sanford of New York. Now, this election pretty much turned into a contest of favorite sons. Now, positions on tariffs and internal improvements did create some significant disagreements, but in general, all these guys had the same political viewpoints. So this was really a campaign of not only favorite sons, but also a sectional campaign. Adams was strong in the old Federalist areas of the Northeast. Jackson was strong in the South and the West and those Mid-Atlantic states. Clay was strong in parts of the West, and Crawford got his support from parts of the East. One little thing of note that I'm going to make is a big thing that happened during Monroe's second term was the Monroe Doctrine, which basically said Europe can no longer meddle in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere, and the United States would no longer meddle in the affairs of Europe. Basically, I stay in my hemisphere, and in my domain, and you stay in your domain, type of thing. But anyway, Calhoun, although he ran with both Adams and Jackson, he supported Jackson, because he considered his political beliefs to be more compatible with those of most voters in the southern states. But both Adams and Jackson supporters backed Calhoun's candidacy as vice president. He's easily going to win the vice presidency. But in reality, Calhoun was vehemently opposed to nearly all of Adams' policies, but he did nothing to dissuade Adams' supporters from voting for him for vice president. So despite the fact that he didn't really support Adams at all, as far as policy was concerned, he would be willing to work with Adams as the vice president. Now, traditionally, back in the 1800s, the candidates themselves would not go out and campaign. They're surrogates. They would have people go out and do it for them. And this campaign took on many forms. Something called contrafacta, or well-known songs, and tunes whose lyrics have been altered were used to promote political agendas and presidential candidates. A notable one, Hunters of Kentucky, was used to promote Andrew Jackson as a national hero. Contrafacta had been a long-standing tradition in presidential elections. This campaign also hit the presses, so to speak. Political cartoons and partisan writings were best circulated among the voting public through newspapers. Calhoun was one of the candidates most directly involved through his participation in the publishing of the newspaper The Patriot as a member of the editorial staff. So this was a surefire way for Calhoun to promote his own political agendas and his own campaign. Now, as I said earlier, in contrast, most candidates involved in early 19th century elections didn't go out and campaign themselves. They would have surrogates do it for them. Now, with all that in mind, let's get to the results, because it is gonna get a little cray-cray. Now, the electoral map is, if you look at the electoral map, if you look at it, at the electoral map for the 1824 election, it's going to be pretty sectional in nature. Adams is going to be strong in those old Federalist strongholds in the Northeast. Jackson's going to have support of some western states. Of those mid-Atlantic states, he's going to have support of the South. His support is mainly going to be in the West. And Crawford's support is basically all over the place, mostly in the South. So taking a look at the actual numbers, Jackson finished first with 99 electoral votes. He won 12 states in the Electoral College. Adams finished second with 84 electoral votes, winning 7 states in the Electoral College. Crawford finishing third with 41 electoral votes. He's only going to carry Virginia and Georgia. Clay's going to finish in third with 37 electoral votes. Is going to carry Ohio, Kentucky, and Missouri. In terms of the popular vote, Jackson's going to finish first with 41.4%. Adams is going to finish second with 30.9%. 13% for Henry Clay, finishing third, and 11.2% for Crawford, finishing last. But nobody got the majority of the votes in the Electoral College. 261 electoral votes were casted. 131 were needed to win. Nobody got it, so according to the Constitution, the election gets thrown into the House of Representatives. At this point, this is the second time that an election had been decided by the House of Representatives, and this is the last one for it to be decided in this way. According to the 12th Amendment, the top 3 candidates go to the House of Representatives so they can make their case on why the House should elect them. So therefore, Henry Clay is dropped. But Henry Clay, he's in a special place. He's the Speaker of the House. And he's going to play a big role in this election. Now, come election day number 2 in the House of Representatives, some sort of deal was reached. We don't know the details of the deal, but to put it in a nutshell, Henry Clay promised that John Quincy Adams would be elected president on the first ballot, and Clay would be made the Secretary of State. Why would Clay want to be the Secretary of State? Because the Secretary of State was essentially being the heir to the presidency. The Vice President really is the heir to the presidency, but the Secretary of State position wasn't the effective heir to the presidency, because we had Jefferson, we had Madison, we had Monroe, and now it looks like it's going to be Adams, who have all been Secretary of State and now President. So Clay wants the Secretary of State position so he can one day become president. This deal does happen. Adams is elected president by the House on the first ballot. Adams is going to carry 13 states. Jackson is going to carry South Carolina, going to carry Mississippi and Alabama, going to carry Tennessee, Indiana, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And Crawford's going to carry Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, and Delaware. Crawford suffered a stroke, so it was really down to Adams and Jackson. And Jackson's supporters screamed bloody murder about this. They charged Adams was elected by a corrupt bargain. Via a corrupt bargain with Henry Clay. And this would set up the rematch for the election of 1828, which we'll talk about next time. But before we go, a couple of things to note about this election. This is the first presidential election in which the candidate who received the most electoral votes did not become president. This was also the first of 4 elections in which a candidate who won a presidential election did not win the popular vote. Now, Adams and Clay supporters would coalesce and form the National Republican Party, and later on the Whigs. The Jackson supporters coalesced and formed the Democratic Party, the modern Democratic Party that we know today, and really sets up the stage for the second party system that's going to last well into the 1850s, close to the Civil War. Alrighty, next time we'll talk about the election of 1828. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, go ahead and watch those if you want. I hope you enjoyed this one as well. Have a good day, and we will see you next time.